Everyone, Chanukah Sameach. I hope you're all doing well. It just started the first band of rain here in Tel Aviv of what's meant to be a very Shavua Gashum, a very rainy week. So I hope you're all doing well and your Chanukiot are nice and bright. So today, in case we have any new people and you didn't catch Ali's intro, so Cafe Oleh, we really try to focus on the Hebrew that you use in everyday life here in Israel, whether or not you're in Ulpan, with a focus more on beginners, but really trying to focus on practical Hebrew, the words that you would be using in your respective countries of origin, but especially here in Israel, they're even more important to know. And we try to keep this as user-friendly as possible, so not only do we make it about practical Hebrew, it's also about the topics you want some help with. Again, not being, a personal dictionary to you, but trying to navigate what it means to live in Israel and understand some things that maybe you can't find out from an ulpan, let alone a dictionary. So with that, we had a request today to talk about math. Now, like many of you probably, I have a love-hate relationship with math. So I'm not going to get you through algebra in Hebrew. I'm not going to teach you operations and things like that. I am going to teach you two operations, but it's in a very practical sense. You'll see what I'm talking about when it comes to mathematics every day. You can probably already think about different topics you have in mind. I certainly do. I want to take you through some of the words I put together today and some of the important things to keep in mind, again, that I don't necessarily think are covered by a dictionary or ulpan. And of course, leave questions to you at the end. I do have to sign off a bit early as I'm doing a webinar for Mashup, but I am here with you for our class today. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. As always, you are welcome to take notes. You're welcome to screenshot. You'll also get a recording of this. You can also do old school writing, pen and paper or pencil and paper, whatever is easiest for you. So with that, with this request to do math. What do I mean by that? So what I mean is everyday math. Again, not algebra, not calculus, not trigonometry, everyday math, whether it's at the supermarket, whether it's, when we can go back to going to restaurants and bars, but certainly home economics, right? So I have a couple words here. I have a list here, and I want to go through each of these together with you. As you see, the Hebrews on the right-hand side with nikud, with the dots and lines that indicate vowel sounds, because in Hebrew, again, we don't write vowels as letters. The middle one is transliteration for American English. And on the left-hand side, both English and any notes. And I'm going to take you through each of these words anyways. So let's start at the top. We have 4 verbs here that all have to do with some sort of math operation. Again, I didn't put in here how to subtract or how to multiply, although we can go through that if you absolutely want. I really want to do something a little bit more tachlis, as we say, a little bit more practical. So the first one is lechalek. Lechalek, you may have heard some of these before, you may have not. I just want to take you through these to talk about everyday math. So lechalek means to divide, but it also means to split. So if you are doing a math operation and it requires division, this is the verb you're going to use, lechalek, and it's in the infinitive, to divide, but it also means to split, right? So if you're going, let's say, when we can go back to a restaurant and sit inside and split the check between people, or let's say you're ordering on Wolt and you want to split the bill, or on Get, or any of the other apps where you can pay online and you can split the bill between people, you're going to ask about lechalek, efshar lechalek. Is it possible to split the bill, right? Lechalek, to divide, but also to split. And this is in any permutation, right? Doesn't have to be between 2 people, it can be between 50 people, or it can be between 50 different items. If you want to pay, for example, at the register of a clothing store between mizuman, cash, and Kartis Ashrei credit card, you would also ask to lechalek. Okay? Next word. Next word is, the next 3 all are numeric in meaning, and they're important, and they have slight distinctions between them. So the first one is lahachpil. Lahachpil, here in row 3, means to double, okay? To double something. So if you need to double the amount of an ingredient in a recipe or double your order of something, okay, that's lahachpil. It literally means to make something or to cause to be double. We're going to get to the word for double as an adjective in a little bit, but just the verb to double something, to cause something to double is lahachpil. Great verb to use. And using that same root, that same sholosh, right, of, in this case, kaf, pe, lamed, which has this notion of creating two of something, we have the verb lishachpel. Now, you're going to see a lot of these verbs, there's actually not a lot, but a lot of more recent vocabulary in the Hebrew language takes existing sholoshim, it takes existing three-letter roots, and it adds at the beginning a shin, right? So it theoretically is a four-letter root, but it's based on a three-letter root. And in this case, it's trying to make a new, more contemporary action based on something that's older. So lachpil has been around for some time in Hebrew, but lishachpel has not. Lishachpel is taking that same root that means double, but instead it means to duplicate, right? So instead of double, it's duplicate. So if you needed to lishachpel maftechot, you need to duplicate keys. This is what you're going to be asking to do when you go to a store, or if you see a store that says shichpul maftechot, right? Shichpul is the verbal noun of the verb l'shachpel, and so it's the act of duplicating. Duplicating or duplication would be shichpul. To duplicate is l'shachpel. Okay, so the same exact root used here. Sorry, just 1 second. I didn't turn off my mobile WhatsApp, and that definitely needs to get off. Sorry, just 1 minute. Just turn this off. Sorry, just 1 minute. No. There you are. Good. All right. Great. Okay, so lishachpel we said is to duplicate, and lachpil is to double. The last one we have of these verbs that have a numeric meaning is one you'll rarely hear, but just for the sake of uniformity, just so you have it, is lishalesh. Lishalesh is to triple, okay? In the event that you need to triple something, there's an actual verb for it. Again, you're gonna rarely hear this, much less use it, but just so you know, there is a verb to triple in Hebrew, it's lishalesh, which comes from the, obviously the number shalosh. Shalosh is 3. So lishalesh, to turn something into threes, to triple. Okay, but again, you'll rarely hear this verb. I just want to put it in there for uniformity. While we're on numbers, and before we get to ones that you probably are less familiar with, I wanted to go over something that trips up every Hebrew learner there is when it comes to the number 2. Because the number 2 is a little odd in Hebrew in what you're normally taught when you learn numbers in general, but specifically when it comes to learning the numbers in Hebrew. So first off, we know that numbers in Hebrew already get us a little confused because they're gendered. All of Hebrew is a gendered language, and so we have 2 sets of numbers in Hebrew, right? We have masculine and feminine. And numbers, that's important when you're modifying something. So when you're saying that there are 2 phones or 3 phones, let's say 3 phones, right? You have to match the form of the number with the noun that it's referring to. It's as if it's an adjective. It's not just what kind of phone, in this case it's a black phone, it's also how many is as much an adjective. So it's not just telephone shachor, a black cell phone, it's, if I had 3 phones here, it would be shlosha celularim or shlosha telefonim, okay? So, that being said, it gets a little tricky with the number 2. So number 2, if we're just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, we have in row 7 here, the number 2. Shnaim and shtaim, right? Shnaim is feminine, shtaim is masculine. Remember, the trick with numbers in Hebrew is that what you would normally assume to be one gender is the opposite, right? So when we count, we're actually counting in the feminine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 are all feminine. As opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that's all masculine, right? You hear that at the end, your natural inclination is to say that's feminine. Remember, in numbers, it's the complete opposite with gender. Same thing here with shnaim and shtaim. When typically a word at the end has the letter taf, it usually means it's feminine, not in the case of the number 2. Shnaim is feminine, shtaim is masculine. Okay? And what's important here is the next row as well. Because you all know shnaim and shtaim, you probably also know the words shnei and shtei. And many of you have probably, even if you've learned the difference between the two, sometimes you forget, and sometimes other people around you forget. And so what's the difference between these two? So like I said, the number 2 is an outlier. And it goes like this, as I wrote here in the notes. Shnaim and shtaim are when you're counting, or when all you need is the word for 2. It's not referring to anything, or you're answering a question with the number 2, right? Then it's shnaim or shtaim, depending on gender. If you're modifying something, so I'm not just saying, for example, if I was asked, Kama machshavim yesh lecha? How many computers do you have? If I want to answer, I can answer in 2 ways. I can just say, I can either just say 2, or I can say 2 computers. So in this case, I'm going to say, if I want to say 2 computers, I have to say shnei machshavim. Okay, so the shnei and the shtei refer to when it's a modifying something, it's an adjective, and shnaim and shtaim are just when it's a number standing by itself. Okay. All right, moving along to less known words, but are very practical in everyday language that you personally using in English, definitely here in Israel. So let's start with the top. So we did the number 2 a lot. We have now kaful. Kaful means double. It's using that same root we had before, right? Kaf, pe, lamet. This is the adjective. So if something is kaful, it's doubled. It's already doubled. So it's a double of something. Okay, so kaful, this is the only one that has this. There is mishulash, which would technically be triple, but you, again, rarely hear that. Also because mishulash can also mean a triangle. So kaful you'll hear a lot more, and that refers to double. Okay, now we're going to get into fractions. Now, I'm not asking you, any of us, to be doing algebra here or any mathematical equations, but just the everyday fractions that we use, whether it's paying something, whether it's following a recipe, whatever it is, the very basic fractions that we use in everyday life. Okay, so the first one I'm going to do, you probably know the word chetzi, right? Chetzi simply means half. If someone says to you, chetzi, chetzi, that is the equivalent in English of 50-50, right? If I want to split something 50-50, I say chetzi, chetzi, literally meaning half-half, right? Chetzi is half, chetzi, chetzi is the same thing as 50-50, okay? This isn't the same, this is basically the equivalent of 50%, of 50% is how we would say 50%, but if you want to say split in half, or anything is 50-50, it's chetzi chetzi in Hebrew. Okay? Next one. Again, we're going to get into some ones you may not know, but again, I'm trying to keep it as basic with the fractions as possible. The first one is shlish. Shlish, just like it sounds, like the number shalosh, is the word for 1/3. 1/3. Okay, so shlish is 1/3. 1/4 is reva, right? It has the same root as alba. Alba meaning 4, reva. Those of you who know harova hayehudi, the Jewish quarter in the old city of Jerusalem, Rova means a quarter as in like a physical space, but reva is 1/4 in mathematical terms. Okay, so we had shlish, 1/3, reva, 1/4. How do we go above that, right? So 2/3. 2/3 is shnei shlishim, or sometimes you're just going to hear shnei shlish. Okay, so it's 2, again, it's that shnei versus shtei at the beginning. And then shlish is referring back to that 1/3, right? So instead of being 1/3 shlish, it's now shnei shlishim, right? Because it's plural. Although, again, sometimes you're going to hear people say shnei shlish. 2/3 can be shnei shlishim or shnei shlish in modern Hebrew. I know it's a little bit of a tongue twister for some of you with all that sh in there, just so you know what someone's referring to. So shlish, shnei shlish, or shnei shlishim. And then the last one I'm going to do for fractions before I'm not getting into fifths and sixths and eighths and all of that other stuff. We're just keeping it real basic here, is 3/4. 3/4 or 0.75 is shloshet reva'im, or more likely you're going to hear shloshet reva'ei. Okay? Shloshet refers to 3 of the 3/4, and the quarter again is reva. So the plural of reva is reva'im, if you can't say the resh. So shloshet reva'im, or you're going to hear shloshet reva or shloshet rev'ei, excuse me. Either of which you're going to hear multiple ways because, like, I have a love-hate relationship with math, so do many people in Israel who speak Hebrew. So you're going to hear different versions of it, but just know these are the major fractions that you'll hear on an everyday basis outside of chetzi. Shlish, reva, shnei shlishim or shnei shlish, shloshet reva'im or shloshet reva. Okay? And then as we're talking about fractions, we might as well do the its relative in math, which is percentages. Percentages in Hebrew are really simple. It's just you put the number first, and then you say achuz. So if I want to say 15%, 15%. I can be really precise and be grammatically correct and say 15%, because achuz is masculine, and 15 is the way that we say 15 in masculine in Hebrew. But 15%, which happens to be the feminine, is perfectly all right. Again, people mess up numbers all the time in Hebrew. It's perfectly all right. If you can't remember 15 versus 15, they both mean 15, you'll be understood. This is one of the few places it's okay to make a mistake, and no one is, unless they're trying to be really pedantic, is going to correct you. Okay, so achuz, how you do percentage in Hebrew, simply that. You just put the number that you're referring to, followed by the word achuz. We're going to get to, in a second, how to use this in a practical level, the word achuz, but I just want to put that word there. And also, as you can see, we're leading up to a very practical sentence that I alluded to before using math. So the second word I want to use here is mishutaf. We've had this word before, mishutaf. Mishutaf can mean a lot of different things. It can mean a partner. It can mean a roommate. It can mean a lot of different things. In this case, it simply means joint, right? So if something is mishutaf, it's just joint. So if you're paying something together as a joint tashlum mishutaf, a joint payment, or anything like that, mishutaf is just joint, as in partnered together. Just want to put that there because that has to do a lot with how we're paying something, which then leads to this next very important, at least here in Tel Aviv, and I know in other major cities in Israel, is the very polite way to ask when we're allowed to back at restaurants, to ask efshar leosif x achuz. So as you know in Israel, first off, to take a step back, in Israel, like many countries, tipping is not a big deal. You are not expected to tip nearly in as many places as certainly in the United States. And as a result, there are certain things you just don't tip on, right? Cab driver, you do not tip on. Certain deliveries you do or you do not tip on. Most you don't. One exception is in a restaurant. And if you want to give a tip in a restaurant, again, it's usually less than what you would customarily in America. So in Israel, it's custom anywhere between 10 to 15%. How do you go about doing that? Because in Israel, we have the added challenge that there is no line, just like you've seen in America and perhaps some other countries, where you write in the tip amount after they charge your card. We don't have that in Israel. You have to either ask them, and I'm going to teach you how to ask the waiter or waitress to add that as they bill you, or you have to leave the tip in cash. And as we move to a cash-free society in Israel, that second option is going to be less and less possible. So this first one is important, how to add a tip to a bill where you're paying by credit card. And so you're going to ask the waiter or waitress when they come with the bill and you're ready to pay, you're going to ask them, אפשר להוסיף X אחוז. Okay, so why did I pick the number 15 before? Exactly for this. Let's say I had really good service at a place and I want to add 15% to the bill of wherever it is I've just ate out, whether with friends, whether I'm paying mishutaf together with someone, whether I'm just paying by myself. And then I would ask them, I would just give them the card and the bill back, and I would just say, אפשר להוסיף 15%. Okay? So a couple things in this sentence that are important to go over. אפשר להוסיף, is it possible to add? The verb להוסיף, it means to add. So if you were going to ask me, wait a minute, I want to know all the other operations in Hebrew. I gave you another one here. I gave you lechalek before, which is to divide. Now you have leosif, which is to add. Okay? That's number one. Number two, efshar lehosif. Efshar is the polite way to ask a question. Would you, could you, are you, can you? And it's always followed by the infinitive. So if there's ever an issue of gender, whether you don't know the person's gender to whom you're speaking, or you just forgot how to conjugate, efshar is your life preserver. Because when you use the word efshar, you don't have to conjugate the verb that follows it. You keep it in the infinitive. Efshar leosif, efshar lechalek. So if I want to ask the waiter, for example, to divide the bill into two smaller ones, or to divide the total amount, I would say, efshar lechalek, chetzi chetzi. Can you split the bill 50-50, right? I didn't conjugate the verb in efshar lechalek chetzi chetzi. I didn't conjugate the verb here, efshar leosif. So if you are very much beginners and you're afraid of conjugating the wrong way, efshar is your lifetime buddy here. Okay, next part of why this is an important sentence. Efshar leosif, in this case I said 15%, right? So 15%. Now, you probably just heard I did something, and you may be thinking, well, why did he say achuz and not achuzim? Because 15 is plural, it's more than one. So why isn't it 15%? Why did he say 15%? In formal Hebrew, once you count past the number 10, you no longer pluralize a noun that comes after it. So if I wanted to say, I ate 9 sufganiyot, I did not, by the way. If I want to say, I ate 9 sufganiyot, ani achalti 9 sufganiyot. If someone else wanted to say, I ate 10 sufganiyot, they would say, ani achalti 10 sufganiyot. I ate 10 sufganiyot. If someone wanted to really boast and say, I ate 11 sufganiyot, in formal Hebrew, not everyday street Hebrew, in formal Hebrew, they would be 100% correct to say, Ani achalti 11 sufganiya. Stop. Okay? If it's everyday Hebrew, casual Hebrew, no one is being that stringent on grammar, they would say, Ani achalti 11 sufganiyot. Right? After the number 10, in formal Hebrew, in technically correct Hebrew, we don't pluralize the noun that's being modified by that number. So 11 upwards, you don't have to, right? So that's why you'll typically hear, even though most Israelis and most Hebrew speakers don't follow this rule to the letter, to the number as it were, when it comes to asking how can you add 15% tip, they will say, אפשר להוסיף 15%. Or they'll simply just say, אפשר להוסיף 15. Right? This is all understood in the act of giving the card, your credit card and the bill back to the waiter or waitress, what you're intending to do. They're also waiting for a tip, by the way, so you have to say something or you have to mime something if you forget. But here's what you have to say. You don't have to use the word tip. You don't have to use anything else. It's completely understood in that context. If I want to add a tip to a bill, אפשר להוסיף 15%. אפשר להוסיף 12%. Okay? If you wanted to add 10%, you could say אפשר להוסיף 10%. Be completely formally, grammatically correct, excuse me, or you could simply say אפשר להוסיף 10%. Okay? Either way, it's understood. 10%, 12%, 15%. Okay? So it's just know that. You don't have to follow it, but know that in formal Hebrew, from the number 11 up, we don't pluralize a noun that's being modified by a number. You do in all the other things, by the way. So if I'm trying to say, like, there are many black cell phones, you'll still pluralize that, right? יש המון פלאפונים שחורים. But there are people who will just simply not pluralize the noun after the number 11. Okay? Just an important thing out there that you understand. And the last one before I get to your questions is the word P. So P in Hebrew can be used in a lot of different ways. We're still talking math, only math. So if someone raised their hand and wants to say something biblical, we're not talking Bible right now, we're talking math in Hebrew. And when we're talking math in Hebrew, the word P means factor, or in everyday language, times, right? So if I want to say, I was incredibly angry, or that was, if I wanted to just ratchet up anything, right? Whether to exaggerate or that was annoying times 50, right? Like we would say something similar in English, right? That was 50 times worse than I expected. זה היה גרוע פי 50. That was just 50 times worse than I expected, right? So what you're going to do if you want to do that, 50 times worse, 50 times better, 100 times better, you're simply going to use the word P followed by the number that you're referring to. So the formal translation of this would be by a factor of 50, by a factor of 100. In everyday English, we just say that was 50 times worse, or 50 times better, or 100 times worse, or 100 times better. I'm just using 50 or 100. Easy numbers, right? But you could use this for anything. But you're going to hear this word a lot, P, because again, Hebrew and specifically its speakers are very emotive. So if you want to really ratchet up the emotions of something, you use this word P followed by a number, and it's like saying blank times. That was the best class 50 times over, or that was the best times 50, class times 50. It doesn't sound as good in English, perhaps, but in Hebrew, we use this a lot. זה היה הקורס הכי טוב פי 50, או זה היה קורס מצוין פי 50. It was 50 times 50 times more of an excellent class. Okay, so P, you'll hear a lot. These words, again, it's math. It can be a little daunting because math, anyways, for a lot of people is a challenge. I've actually read a few pedagogical things about learning languages that even if you're fluent in a language, you'll still count in your native language because that's such a difficult, challenging, but also intimate thing to do, for lack of a better term. So just so you know the very basics of numbers and operations to have here. I want to stop here and take questions because I see we have a bunch. So let me pull up the questions. Okay. Rona asks, would to triple be used as to take 3 pills the first day and then 1 afterwards? No, that's a great question. It's not, to triple is like to triple the amount of something. Like to triple my salary, to triple your bill, not to triple like the amount of something. So if I wanted to say, when you get a prescription, for example, a milsham prescription, and to take 3 pills the first day, it'll say lakachat, or the fancy word in Hebrew, litol, shlosha kadurim. They'll write out the number. They won't write out shlosha. Lakachat shlosha kadurim bayom harishon. Okay, it's just saying to take the action is taking the medication, not to triple the medication. Okay, so it's just, you would just say on the thing, lakachat shlosha kadurim bayom harishon. That's a great question, but to triple is like to triple the amount of something, like you are creating it. Okay. Evie has a great mnemonic. You should check in the chat window for it, about to remember the number 2. Ben is shnaim, bat is shtaim. That's a great one. Nun and taf. Okay. Eliana asks, what about food delivery or grocery delivery? Is it typical to tip? Great question. If you are ordering online, it'll give you a prompt to tip if you'd like. It is not mandatory, especially if you're paying by credit card. And that's a saving grace. If you don't feel comfortable tipping, pay with a credit card and not with cash. Because if you pay with cash, it's just assumed you're adding the tip to the cash amount. And oftentimes the shaliach, the courier, because the bill hasn't been paid yet, will stand there and count the cash as they're handing you the delivery. So if you don't want to pay a tip for whatever reason, no judgment, best to pay by credit card, because typically that will absolve you of doing it. For example, if you order on Wolt, if you order takeout or groceries or anything on Wolt, it says right there, give a tip to the courier, optional, and you can give however much you want. It's totally up to you. In Israel, there are some couriers who will give you the stink eye if you don't give them a tip. There are some who don't. For example, if it's laundry, oftentimes they won't, because you're paying such a huge amount in dmei mishloach. Dmei mishloach means the delivery fee, that it's understood you don't need to pay a tip on top of that. So use your discretion, but no, it's not expected for you to do that. It will give you the option to do that. Both, I believe, groceries, but certainly for takeaway that's delivered to you. Bruce asks a great question. Lechalek and mishutaf. So let me go back to the screen so you can see that. Lechalek and mishutaf. Lechalek is a verb. It means to divide or to split something. It's a verb, 100% a verb. It gets conjugated like a verb. It happens to be a very regular verb, so there's no irregularities in how it's conjugated. The word mishutaf means joint. Now, that leaves, though, a great question here, and I'm going to write it in here instead of in the chat window, is we do have the word mechulak. Mechulak is the participle of the verb lechalek, and it simply means divided. Mishutaf means shared or joint. So there is a slight overlap in meanings, but they still are different words, right? Joint, shared is mishutaf, mechulak is divided. So if you wanted to say, Cheshbon meshutaf is a joint bill, meaning a group of people are paying a bill, right? But it doesn't say anything about, by the way, who's paying what. It's just that everyone's name is on it. Cheshbon mechulak, a divided bill or split bill, also gives the same impression, right? That it's being split. It's not necessarily that it's being shared, but certainly the cost is being split. Mechulak, meshutaf, there's a lot of similarity to them, but just know that specifically lechalek, that word up here, is a verb and it's the infinitive to divide or to split something. And meshutaf is simply an adjective. It means joint or shared, meshutaf. Okay, it's an adjective. It gets conjugated as an adjective. Okay, but great question. If we have a few more in the, I can get the chat window open, so just a second. Here it is. Let's see. We have a whole bunch of other questions here. Steve asked me to go over the achuz thing again. Okay, let me show you that. So this last sentence, row 20 here, right? Efshar or efshal, depending on if you can say the resh. Lehosif, blank. In Hebrew, when we want to say blank, we say x. So efshar lehosif x achuz or achuzim. Okay, efshar lehosif x achuz or efshar lehosif x achuzim. That is what the customer would be asking the waiter or waitress when they want to pay the bill in the credit card and add tip to it, right? So if efshar lehosif x achuz, could you add or would you add 15%, 10%, 12%, whatever you want to add to it, okay? That's just a sample sentence about using all these different things together. But just so you know, if you're in that situation, or better yet, when we're in that situation, again, when you're ordering at a restaurant, you want to leave a tip, this is how you would ask to leave a tip on a credit card. Because again, in Israel, there is no line that you write in a tip amount. You simply ask for them to put a percentage of the bill as a tip on the card. Okay, but great question, great sentence to have. Efshar lehosif x achuz. Or if you can't say the resh, efshar lehosif x achuz. X meaning that's where you're going to put the number, of course. Okay. Michael asks, what about 15 children, books, houses? Okay, so again, it's going to conjugate based on gender. You can decide if you're going to pluralize it or not. You're going to be completely understood either way. So if I wanted to say, 15 yeladim, typically people, you're going to keep pluralizing. It just sounds correct, right? Because that's the default. The default is that you pluralize beyond, regardless of numbers, except for one. Just that you know in the back of your head, you are going to hear sometimes that after the number 11, it's not pluralized. But yes, correct Hebrew would still be 15 yeladim, 15 sfarim, 15 batim, right? 15 children, 15 books, 15 houses. You can also, by the way, and be completely okay in Hebrew to say 15 yeladim, 15 sfarim, 15 batim. 15 is feminine. All these three sample words happen to be masculine, but it's completely all right. You are allowed to mix gender in that respect. You'll be completely understood. No one will laugh at your Hebrew. If they do, they're being very stickler, and that's on you if you want to keep having a relationship with that person. Yes, Michelle, medicine is not the same word. The pill. There are different kinds of words for pills. Typically, the word for pill is kadur, which is the same word as a ball. It's also, by the way, the same word for scoop of ice cream. So when you go to an ice cream store and you ask for 2 or 3 scoops, you ask for kadurim, okay? Because it looks like a ball when you scoop it out, right? That's the idea. But you also have caplets, tablets, all sorts of other things, but pills. Simple pills, the word in Hebrew is kadur, just like the word for ball. That's not the word for medicine. The word for medicine is trufa, but that's medicine as like a whole family, right? Because within medicine, you have all different kinds of means of doing it. Okay? Deborah asks, are there laundromats in Israel? Yes, there are. Typically in bigger cities, so in Tel Aviv for sure, Jerusalem for sure. They're usually more in central parts of the city, where people are more frequently walking around and being. You're typically not going to find a self-service laundromat in a more affluent area, just like you wouldn't find that in other major cities around the world. It's typically in student housing areas or lower income areas, you'll find self-service laundromats. Michael asks about what is the difference with joint as lehitzaref? Great question. So we have a verb, I'm gonna write this in the chat window. We have a verb, sorry, just one second, I got my phone on me. I need to just check something. Sorry, just one second. Okay, we have a verb, lehitzaref. I'm gonna write this in the chat window. And write lehitzaref means to join. Okay, to join a club, to join a political party, to join anything. We also have the verb Lehishtatef. Lehishtatef. Lehishtatef means to participate. Okay, so to join and to participate, just like we have in English, two different words, they mean slightly different things. But just know that in Hebrew we have two different words. As long as the meaning is understood, you pick the one that makes sense for you. So lehitzaref, this first one is to join. Lehishtatef is to participate. Okay. Laundromats. Miri, no. Like I said, X, very important. X is a placeholder for a number. If you want to say X of something, it's X. X, two different vowels. X is just like the letter X as in algebra, right? Not X as in EX dash, meaning former of something. X is a numeric placeholder. X means X. Okay. Arlene asks the feminine of mishutaf. The feminine of mishutaf is mishutefet. Mishutaf, mishutefet, mishutafim, mishutafot. Lorraine, I won't spell it because we don't write this out. Again, everyone, X is just a placeholder. We don't, this is just when you're writing something, just like you say in English. Could you add X percentage? I'm just giving you a sample sentence. When I say, could you add X percentage, in Hebrew, we just say X. Nothing more complicated than that. Okay. And last question, because I do need to get moving. Gershon asks, I see this term chia often for sales. How do we pronounce that? And what is the percentage discount? Gershon, I don't know what you're referring to. Could you unmute your microphone and explain?
Sure, hi. Hi. I have the website here for Stamatsky, for example.
Okay.
It says, Tishiyaya, Top Shin Yud Ayin Yud Yud Hey.
What's the context of it?
It's in a sale context.
Okay, can you understand what they're offering?
It says safer b'shlashim ba'arba tishim. So I see it for a lot of different places. Is it buy 10, buy 9, get 10, something along those lines?
Let me just quickly open Steimatsky's website just to see
Okay.
this as well. Yeah, not seeing it. I see.
I get text messages from Steimatsky and from Anis with the term.
I see what you're saying. Achia, Salim Movilim. Okay, great question. So what they're referring to here, okay, what they're referring to here from what I can understand. So we have, and I didn't put this in the list on purpose, we have in, just like we have in English, duet, trio, quartet, quintet, sextet, all of that, or 2-pack, 3-pack, 4-pack, 5-pack. We have those words in Hebrew. You can look those up, and you see these a lot when it comes to sales. So Gilshon, you're absolutely right in bringing this up with the context of sale. So for example, Shlishia, a 3-pack. It also means trio, but it also means a 3-pack, or Reviya, or Chamishia, or Shishia. All those things you'll see a lot, right? So oftentimes when you're buying water at the grocery store, you see Shishiyat Mayim, a 6-pack of water. It comes from the number Shish, and it simply means a 6-pack of something, okay? And again, it can also be translated as sextet because it's just a group of 6. So in this case, chi'iyah, which is a very hard word to say, and thankfully you're not going to see that very often, and thankfully it's written out as opposed to having to say it. What I believe they're referring to is their 9 top bestsellers, right? It's a pack of 9 of something. It's probably referring to their top 9 or a bundle of 9 that they're trying to push here, even though I count only 8. So
if I buy one of those 9, they're being pushed at this lower price of $34.90.
These are leading. It says Achia Sfarim Movilim ב-34.90 shach. So if you are a member of Steimatsky Club, you can buy these top 9 books. I assume that's what they're referring to, for $34.90.
Okay. I mean, I've seen the other terms, the 6 and the 5, but this was a little bit out of the same context. So thanks, Jake.
This word you rarely see Chia. It's uncomfortable to say in all of that.
Okay. Thank you much.
You're welcome. Any last questions? Okay, so with that, I do unfortunately need to get off the call, but thank you all for joining. Again, you will get the recording of this. So if you missed any words, if you missed the sheet, you'll get the recording. You'll be able to see everything. Pause it, write it down, screenshot it, however much you want. You'll get the recording. Ali will send that out shortly. And in the meantime, hope you all have a Chanukah Sameach, a Chag Urim Sameach, a happy Chanukah. And I will see you all next week.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, everyone. Chag Sameach. Bye.